It appears to be the PCM. I can't think of anything else or any other reason why it does what it does, but however it measures that voltage inside the PCM, I believe is pulling down that wire. One thing we could do, and I was talking to Keith Perkins about this over at L1 Auto Diagnostics to see if this is anything he's ran across, because I found it pretty, I don't know what the right word is. I found it pretty odd, I guess. I looked at Identifix after we've done some testing here to see if anybody else has ran across this, and there's not a single case where somebody's replaced the PCM for failed knock sensor, for a knock sensor code. So that's a little bit concerning. Not that everybody posts all their findings on there, but certainly if it was common, it would be on there. So I talked to Keith about it to see if I was on the right track, if he thought it's kind of nice to bounce something off somebody. He thinks I'm on the right track. He says, sounds like the brain box has got some damage. He suggested, if we have time and the customer is willing, is to switch those pins. Okay, so that's going to switch knock sensors. And if we come up, because we know it's not flagging a code against knock sensor 2, so if we flip them around and it still throws a code, that 327 code, then we know there's some circuit problem inside the PCM. I'm going to see if my customer is willing to do that, or if they just want to, source a used main brain box and get it in there and get it programmed, or if they want to spend a little bit of time, no parts required, switch those pins around and see if the code comes back with the same 327 code, because that would confirm 100% that it's in the PCM. Or I'm wondering, what if we just switch them, check the signal. We'll switch those wires we'll switch them without switching them. We'll just use a couple jumpers here. And if we do that, and that pulls that signal down on the, known good knock sensor, then we know for a fact that it has to be in the PCM. That makes sense to you? So we're gonna do our known good first, which was our light green, or our light blue wire. I'm just gonna pop into here. I was gonna hook up something fancy, but it'll take me longer than it will just to do this. We're gonna lightly very front probe, and PCM's all in, everything's together. Now we're gonna check. I expect to see something great, something good. Let me go dig out all my stuff again. I already kind of had it, my mind made up what we're gonna do. Here we can just use our U-scope, so I don't have to dig out the other one. Jibber jabbering on the phone, I just took care of it. Jibber jabber. That's a fun word. Let's see. Hook us up and round, and then we're just going to hook on to our known good. We'll turn this baby on. We'll see where we're at here. Move this up. Middle of the screen, we're dealing with AC voltage. And then we're going to move our trigger down, and then we're going to go 1 volt per division, 10 milliseconds on the screen. I'm going to set that somewhere's there, set it somewhere. We both got to be able to see it. Okay, let's get a hammer. Okay, this is known good, sensor numero 20. Change our, where are we at here, 1 volt per division. Probably should just grab our other scope. Okay. So that's our known good sensor. All right, now I'm gonna, everything's all plugged in. And it looks like if we're 1 volt per division, we're about a little over 1 volt right there. Now, I'm gonna just switch knock sensors. We're going on one that would be dark blue, but we're leaving it hooked to the light blue circuit, the good circuit in the PCM. We're gonna see if it pulls this one down. Oh. Hello. Then I'm normal. Interesting. No signal out of the dark blue. Going back to the light blue. We're just using the light blue. We're staying right on the light blue circuit. That's pretty wild. I'm rethinking stuff. So we're saying this is essentially hooked up to the PCM, but we're using just the light blue circuit, and this is the one we know is good. I'm gonna unhook it from the PCM. See if our signal's good. A little higher amplitude, which I would expect. I need to make sure I didn't mix this up at all here. I don't believe I did. No, that is the way it plugs in. Okay. So I wanted to make sure. We're going back. This is the dark blue. This is the one we're having problems with. Completely unhooked from the PCM right now. Interesting. And as soon as we plug it into the PCM, doesn't matter which circuit, knock sensor 1 or knock sensor 2, it pulls it down. I wonder, so I'm hooked into knock sensor number 2 circuit right now, the PCM, the good circuit, the one we suspect is good. We got nothing, it won't even trip the trigger. But if we go back to knock sensor light blue, knock sensor 2 on knock sensor 2 circuit. Yeah, that one easily overcomes our trigger. I am thankful that I talked to Keith and talked about switching circuits. I don't believe there is a main brain box problem now. At this point, I would want to pull the intake manifold, verify the use of OEM parts, and perhaps the sensor has good resistance value, but doesn't have good output. Let me see where knock sensor 1 is located. If it's in the front of the intake or the rear of the intake, we could probably look at a picture of a parts diagram and see where the dark blue wire goes. If it goes to the back or to the front. Looking at a parts diagram there on Napper and one other site, the dark blue wire, the one that we're having a problem with, the knock sensor that has the lowest amplitude signal, is the front knock sensor, and we're banging up here on the front, so that should be the one that creates the most noticeable signal. Knock sensors are very sensitive to torque. I know we often, joke around about using the torque wrench here on our channel. It is one of the things that we ultimately torque. We torque that, brake fluid caps, washer fluid jugs, things of that nature, but absolutely must torque knock sensors, very sensitive to that. At this point, armed with the knowledge that we have, seeing that we could switch the circuits, known good circuit, light blue one's not giving us any fits, but it doesn't matter which knock sensor we put on it. When we put the knock sensor 1 on the known good circuit, our signal still disappears. I am deeming something wrong inside that knock sensor. So this is why we go above and beyond. And one thing that was taught to me, and ironically enough was taught to me by Keith, was if you call the PCM, or if you make the call on anything, if you make the call on this ignition coil, this alternator, this throttle body, the purge valve, if you make the call on it, say this part is bad, and you're wrong, what are you going to do next? That's always the question you ask yourself, and that's your question that leads you to going one step further in going this direction. Because if I'm wrong, if the PCM is not bad, what's going to be my next step? Well, here we are. So let me go talk to customers, see what he wants to do. We got the green light. Waiter's gonna wait. I'm gonna pop this intake off, not gonna show you guys that process. There's probably a zillion videos on the line. There's no water or anything that runs through these intakes, so basically just unbolt it, unhook some wires. That's the long and short of it. We're gonna look and see. I need some closure. I can't let this one go. We're there, folks. Took me longer to find my extension that I dropped, and it slid all the way across the top of the transmission and stayed back there. I got it though, once we got the intake off. So this is the one we're having problems with, this little guy right here. Only when it's plugged in though. And I believe it looks like the porcelain where it plugs in appears to be cracked. I don't know if that'll do anything. I could be wrong. I want to look at this one, see what this one looks like. No, maybe it's not. This one has the same two cracks in it right across from each other. Well, let's take and let's pull that up out of there. You can see this one has an old piece of broken plastic down in there. Let me grab a socket for these. Let's pull them up out of there. Harness is obviously new. No way to tell if it's GM. It just says made in Taiwan on it. Looks like every aftermarket harness out there. Let's pull that up. We do have some AC Delco sensors on the way. Grab this a 7/8 socket. Holy crap. Short ratchet, so. Okay, yeah, they're not cracked. Must be that's just some kind of manufacturing mark. That's weird. These just say Taiwan 926084. I believe these are made by Dorman. If I had to guess, I think Dorman sells a kit. I've got this rag in there because the cowl's dripping water down. And if somebody saw a water droplet go inside an intake port, wowzer. (926-084). Yeah, so it says 926-084, and then there's a space, and then I just wiped all the rating off it just by touching it. Let's try this one. Let's not touch it. 926-084, then there's a space, 6-9er, and then the number 5, and then down below that I think it says 2170 Taiwan. Let's just see for poop and laughter. This was our bad one. The one we suspect is bad is now going to be on the light blue wire. And the one that was working is now on the dark blue wire. Okay. Let's see if our problem has switched. All we are is strangers in the night. Let's grab a scope. We're going to turn that on. Grab us a ground. And then we're going to just probe very lightly. Going to get a little front probe action. Okay. There's our scope. Here's our striking apparatus. Now I thought that this kept our settings, previous settings, but evidently it does not. I'm going to put that on normal. We're going to get the right position here. Move our trigger all the way down. Blow a volt. 1 volt per division. milliseconds, 1 volt per division. Is that not playing? Okay, it is. Okay. Stick that right there. Grab my hammer. Hammer time. I've got no signal whatsoever. That's weird. Should have a good ground down there, no problem. And that's because I'm plugged into the vehicle side harness with everything unplugged. Hi folks, my name's Eric. This is my first day. Oh gosh, you can't trust this guy any further than you could throw him. Always question yourself. We're into the dark blue wire. Holy signals, Batman. Okay. Got super duper good signal there. That's on the dark blue wire. That's the one that we know is good now. Now we're going to the, which is going to be the light blue wire, but the bad knock sensor. Tell right now the amplitude is lower, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to plug it up and see if our signal disappears. Okay, I'm going to look and see if it disappears. Amplitude is significantly lower plugged in. Now this is that same, this is the circuit, this is the dark blue wire circuit. Significantly higher amplitude. I'm going to wait for the new sensors to show up, and I'm going to, I'm sorry if you guys couldn't see that. Oh, maybe you could, maybe you couldn't. I'll give you some definitive proof here when we're done. I'm going to go talk to my customer. I did order 2 knock sensors. And I'm going to encourage him to put in both, even though this one here technically works. We tore it apart this far. I'm going to say OEM. I'm going to look up the torque spec. We're going to wait for those to show up. And then put those in. I think they're around 18 foot-pounds, something along that line. And then the good news is, if indeed these are Dorman, well, I'm going to go look right now. I'm sure Dorman will cut this guy a check, because they're good like that. They're real good about paying. Okay, here we go. Here we go, folks. Fresh from Mexico. Genuine GM. That's how you know it's real. These don't have the crack across the top of the porcelain. Like I say, that appeared to be a manufacturing deal. I called Dorman while we were waiting for these. 100%. They said they're going to cover the cost of the parts and a certain amount of labor. The guy's super happy about that. I figured they would. Here's the other genuine GM one. Part number is 125-89er-867. What? Oh my gosh. What a stupid thing. Assembled in Mexico. Okay, here we go. Stick that in there. 15 pound-feet of torque is what they say. We're gonna have to get a little tiny torque wrench, which is basically, we're gonna put torque on them, but they're not even gonna move. It's literally just hand tight. Let me go get that and get these torque to spec. Fella put me in a little bit of a weird situation. You know, when he had come in the first time, you know, I had expressed to him if he took this anywhere, you know, besides here, that I highly recommend, you know, OEM sensors. And he had told the fella that he had taken it to, that was the case, you know, and this, you know, it's a legit shop, you know, registered repair shop. And, you know, that's what he had told him, and that's what the guy said he had done. You know, so this guy now is asking me, he's like, well, what should I say to such and such? Like, I don't like to get involved in that. I'm not gonna tell you what to go to say to the other shop. He told me what he paid, and he told me what he paid for this whole job, which included that oil pressure switch, the new intake gaskets, the new knock sensors, the harness, and labor. He got charged for Dorman sensors. He did not pay for OEM sensors. So he didn't, in my opinion, he didn't get ripped off, other than, you know, the fact that, you know, the shop just didn't use, you know, OEM parts. So, yeah, I don't believe he got taken, we'll say. So I did express that to him. Okay, we've got some good action from the back section. We're gonna put this on normal. I'm gonna set that where hopefully you guys can see it. We may have to enhance. Let's see. Let me get you guys set up on that. All right, so everything is plugged in. The ECM is hooked up, everybody's plugged in, we're all happy. This is the sensor that was giving us a hard time the first time. This is the sensor that was quote unquote bad. And we are at 1 volt per division, so above the line, above the green line is 1, 2, 3, 4 volts. And you can see that our peak is well up into that range. Now let me change our time basis here. I'm gonna slow this down. 1 millisecond. She's quick. So lots of good amplitude there, and that is plugged in. So that's fantastic. Now we're gonna go to the sensor that was not giving us a problem, the light blue wire. All right, shouldn't have any issues here. This is the knock sensor in the back of the engine. And we can see the amplitude is not as high, but look, I'm a long ways away, and I'm gonna go back by that sensor. Oops, knocked our ground wire off here. Let me reattach my ground. Hopefully you guys are still zoomed in. I'm gonna go back closer to that sensor. And you can see the amplitude. If I can get my ground wire to stay. Need to come up with a vice grip with a banana jack adapter on it. There's an idea. I'm gonna knock right in between these two sensors. So this is knocking the middle of the intake right between the two sensors. Yeah, super nice. Gonna switch it back to our one that we suspect is bad. Middle of the intake should be the same signal. Get my dang punch to hold still here. There we go, folks. I'm happy. We're done. We're out of here. Show's over. So that's it. That's the difference between crappy aftermarket parts and OEM parts. And that's why when you're doing knock sensors on your Chevy, put OEM sensors in it. Period. I have used standard motor products ones with good success. I can say that. But at the end of the day, they're almost the price of OEM. Put in the OEM. You can use an aftermarket harness, put in OEM sensors. Waiter's gonna wait, so I'm gonna get this thing slammed back together, torque everything to spec, clear the codes, and be thankful I didn't pull the trigger on an ECM. I hope that's some definitive proof for you folks, and also I guess if we can get a learning lesson from here, and not just the learning lesson of, you know, don't use aftermarket, use OEM, because OEM can be junk too, but the lesson could be to follow through with your diagnosis and ask yourself that all important question: if this doesn't work, what am I gonna do next? And I'm glad to have friends like Keith that encourages me to ask myself the same thing, or has taught me that, and then also to bounce ideas off from, and talked about switching those circuits. So great idea. We would have came up with the same answer if we had just reversed them, let the customer go, and then we would have seen the code would have changed, okay? We would have come up with the other knock sensor code, which would have told us, you know, bad sensor. So can easily be tricked. So make sure you're checking these things every which way to Sunday, I guess. Unplugged, resistance check. We proved that means nothing. At least in this case, it means nothing. It tested good. They both tested around that 100,000 ohm mark. And I think there's some variance there, 98 to 105,000, somewhere in there. We're well within the parameter of that. And then also checking them open circuit, they were seemingly good. If we really displayed them both on the, plot them both on the screen, we would have seen a lower amplitude out of that one in the front because, we're up there banging near the front. We would have seen that lower amplitude signal. Would you have made the call on that? I don't know. If it was like teeny tiny versus, if it was like a volt and a half and the other one's 1.8, I don't know. I don't know if I would have gotten too excited about that. But then the fact that when we tested everything all plugged in, circuit complete, that's where we saw the failure. And I hope that was portrayed in the video. I can't say it was. Sometimes I say things that just don't make sense. I can make sense out of your comment, though, in that comment section. I'm not going to show you putting the intake on and stuff. If the truck comes back, trust me, we'll have a part 3. Eric will get to come back part 3. Well, you're down there making sense of that. Insta, Facebook, and just remember, viewers, if I can do it, you can do it. Thanks for watching.